BSD Talk, der Podcast von buildingSMART Deutschland.
Hello and welcome to the special edition of our podcast, recorded ahead of the buildingSMART International Summit in Berlin. As we prepare to welcome experts and visionaries from around the world, we're taking a step back to look far ahead. Just 5 years ago, AI was still more promise than presence. Self-driving cars were test projects, digital twins sounded like something out of science fiction, and many of us thought, yes, maybe one day, but not tomorrow. And then, almost overnight, the future caught up with us. AI started writing our texts, answering our mails, even designing buildings. Our phones began to anticipate our needs, our homes got smart, and suddenly entire industries had to ask themselves, did we just enter the age of AI for real? Looking back, the leap was enormous and it's still accelerating. So the big question is, where do we go from here? Especially in the world of construction, things often feel slower. We talk about building information modeling, digital twins, smart infrastructure. But in reality, we still deal with fragmented processes, lost information, and siloed systems. So maybe the real question is, what would the future look like if we actually worked better together? To help us take that wider view beyond our professional bubbles, we've invited someone who explores the future not just as a trend, but as a tangible horizon. Max Thinius, futurologist, speaker, and someone who turns possibilities into perspectives. Max, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So that's always like better together, isn't it?
Yes, exactly like that. That's why we're here together. And now, Max, first question. People call you a futurologist, or it's not even actually that you call yourself a futurologist. But that sounds fascinating, but also a bit mysterious. How did you become one? And what does a normal day in the future actually look like for you?
Oh, wow. A normal day in the future just looks like probably a day like today with some more possibilities, probably. As we know of future scientists or futurists today, they are mostly about trends and they're trying to predict the future and building up pictures with models. But to really create a future, you have to first have some of your own values and then you search for the possibilities, the actual technology, political structures, infrastructures, the structure of your business, the whole world, nature provides you. And that is so much more than you can even think. So what I learned from the very beginning, and this was my first mentor, was Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop. And she always told me, Max, don't do concepts because everything you know is just a very little of what the world knows. So always have your values in mind and what you want to really build, and then let you overwhelm from the possibilities which the future has for you. And I try to pack that today into concepts, into workshops, into keynotes, and try to inspire some people with it. And mostly this works very well.
So I get already the idea that when you are talking about future, there is a lot of optimism and also a lot of humor to some degree. Where does that positive outlook come from? Do you train that perspective specifically, or is it just of who you are?
Well, why should anyone get up and have a negative perspective? That doesn't make any sense at all. I just don't see any sense in doing so. So I always try to bring that up to people, and there's figures to get into it. This is 84% of everything we live in our lives is positive. So it's just about 16% which is really negative. So why should we be kind of like depressive or negative or anything like that? So the future is positive, and it's even when you think of the negative stuff and try to create future, you will never get to another point because you always are in trouble with what is not probably working. So you don't even think about the possibilities, you're just in probabilities. You always think of what may happen to me and where do I have to prepare for. So like fight or flight. And this cost at least 73 till 78% of energy of most people. and to have an open mind to just get up and see what possibilities are out there. And there's so many possibilities you could even guess. But then there's one problem most people have, and they have all the old narratives from the industrial age. And this keeps them away from these possibilities because they always think like, well, a car has to be driven like that. Buildings have to have windows like that. They have to have kind of like a structure like that. But maybe it's all different. And maybe buildings or mobility or whatever we do in our lives, or even technologies, getting some entirely new appearance in the age of digitality, which is not the age of digitalization, because the age of digitality, and this is a kind of like the word we use in science, is the mixture of digital, so all the technology, and reality. So this is digitality. And most people just go for the technological part and think, when I can use AI, I know how future works. But AI really just helps you to bring all the dots together to create a future you probably want.
So let's keep our optimism,
Definitely.
the look ahead. But let's zoom out a little and take a look at actually what is waiting for us. So if you look at the next 10 to 15 years, what developments will truly change the way that we live, work, and think? What do you think?
It's very easy to bring all this into two probably sections. The one is there's one new word, and this is kind of like living intelligence. So that is much more than artificial intelligence. And we tend to always think that everything we do today has got something to do with artificial intelligence, or this can help us in some way. And 96% of everyone in the world uses artificial intelligence just for automation. However, artificial intelligence is a cognitive tool, so it's not to just automate some work stuff which is already in processes and structures of industrialization, but it is to help people bring all the dots together in a cognitive way and really get some new ideas. And this brings me to the second part, that the era we are shifting is not like the past eras. We were always like bringing them together, the age of information, the age of digitality, or the age of data, or whatever we had. This was all technological substantives, but it really is much more like we're going from the age of integration, which we had in the industrial era. So there's always a structure which was given, and we had to integrate. We had to adopt the possibility of the structure. So every technology was like that. So like probably when you drive a car, then you can use it to go faster than you can walk, but you can't use it for anything else. And when you have a building, which is technology as well, then you have probably a hospital, and then you're like a doctor, or like a patient. Or when you go into a school, you're like a teacher, or well, you're a badass probably. Then the other way, if you're but today technology shift, and it's not anymore like integration, but it's a kind of era of inclusion where we really fit together with technology to some new idea. And that is what always fascinated me about like what we're talking about here as well, like BIM, because you are always kind of like fixed data is stuck into buildings. But all the data you have today is like when you have a great building, like we built schools at my home in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and we really could see that we really could have the data that these schools empower pupils to do better marks, to connect better with the environment, to connect better with society. So it's not just the infrastructures, it's not just the building material, but it's the whole society which you can really grab through data today. And that is what I mean by living intelligence, that you bring all this together, and therefore you need a platform to keep all this data, to show it to someone who can analyze it, and that must be people, human beings, because this can't be done by technology.
Hmm. Sounds a lot like to me. It's much more getting purpose driven. So they were really thinking about the actual purpose of buildings, what they were actually made for.
I don't like purpose as a term, because
Hmm.
purpose as
Hmm.
a term is today used mostly like to so we have to do something which is sustainable.
Hmm.
But it's like I don't like sustainability at all as well, because we wouldn't need to have sustainability if we would have had humanity in the first place. So if we wouldn't bring in products which are
Mm-hmm.
bad for the planet, bad for people, bad for surrounding, like there's so much stuff in food, in any kind of business, even in mobility and in buildings, which is not good for people and for the planet, but we brought it into, if we would have had this
Mm.
in mind and could have seen it from the beginning, we wouldn't need to talk about purpose today or sustainability, because it wouldn't be our topic. And in future, we won't talk about these topics either, because it's much more the question of, we are talking about what is not giving any purpose, or which is not sustainable, because everything will be, because we have the data, we can see what happens if we do it. And more people will see it is much more efficient and economic, not just ecologic, but economic, really, to be like sustainable, as we use the term today, from the very beginning and not just afterwards. So if we done wrong, so let's plant some trees. That's not the answer anymore. So the answer is to think before and then act as well. One of my favorite examples from Copenhagen is that there is this new Nordhavn area which is built, and there 35% of the building material has to be of direct recycling. So there is walls of ships, there's other houses which are replaced there and which are rebuilt there. And it's taken one on one, so that you just take all these big metal plates which ships are made from, and doing facades for buildings out of it. And that is very, very gorgeous,
Mm-hmm.
because these buildings will last forever, because you have a 5 centimeter ship steel on the front of it. And if you ever want to change a building, you can take these panels off and reshape the whole building and properly reshape it. So you will never, ever use new material for these parts
Mm.
again.
Sounds like a really great example, right? How to do things also differently and shape our near future differently. But on the other hand side, right, in construction and planning, many people feel that progress is quite slow and feels more like the opposite. So are we at a risk that we're missing here somehow a train, or is there still time to catch up and reinvent it? Do you have more examples so how we can shape our future?
I think the whole business of building is kind of like a little bit behind, or probably in some parts it's very much behind.
Mm.
But it is not because of there are no possibilities. It's just because people just don't want. Because there are structures where some people are really earning a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like with modular building, if you use modular building, you save enormous amounts of building material. And then there's some companies who really don't like saving building materials, because they live from selling these stuff. And if you have about 30% or 40% off when you build a house of the materials, which simply disappears or whatever happens to it, it's kind of like good for your business, probably. And what I've seen is that in other countries like Denmark or even
Mm.
Spain or Italy, there's a lot of more of modular building. And in China, it's kind of like some new stuff. And they even have some like meta material, where you have the opportunity that the material is kind of like, it can transfer energy, light, heat, and then data. And you don't have to fix any cables in this material. It's just the material who knows how to connect to the next panel. And if you rebuild the house, or if you want to have another usage of it, you just change the idea of these metamaterials. And this is kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit more expensive in the beginning, but if you count that on probably the 10, 20, 30, 50 years a house may last, and you don't have to change any cables or whatever, that really makes a difference. But this is kind of like another problem, that most of these investors are selling their stuff for like 5 or 10 years, and then they are just out of business. So they are not interested in really investing. So, but there's hope coming, because there's some funds who
Mm.
already set up like some sustainability guidelines, and then they rate buildings in another
Mm-hmm.
way, and they really are interested in that there is a long time view on them. to give them a really A rating. And there's a girl like you may know her, Sonja Knorr. She's very, very far into this rating business, and she really changed the market. And this is already happening. And I think when you, like in Copenhagen, have these 35% of you have to use direct recycled material. Today, in our minds, this means this costs more because recycled materials is more expensive than new. But in these cases, you always save about 20, 30, 40% of the money which you use for material usually. And this makes it different now. And I think that with all these, I mean, you know the house prices today, you know how this involves and how much more we need. And we really need to have cheaper buildings, and we really need to give buildings a new use in cities because the whole structures of cities change, and there is no way to just do it with building on a new base or building or rebuilding the old stuff. We really have to think in a new way, and we really have to keep the money together, especially if some communal buildings, they don't have any much money anymore. And I think there is a change coming, and by knowing what buildings can do to society today, like not just be housing or a building, but really inspiring whole areas, this gives them another view, and we have to keep this new view to really shape cities in a new way.
Got it. It reminds me also a bit like this discussion about is it worth the investment of the discussion around building information modeling. Of course, it's a very different, perspective and angle and so on. But if we understand it as a backbone where we have then the data to cover all of these complex aspects and make better decisions and so on, still we have a main discussion about that people are always scared of, well, is it really worth the investment to go full digital and to use the possibilities that we have with building information modeling? And in the end, I guess many of these projects that could have, resulted in great buildings are then actually falling back to the conventional methods and so on. But people don't tend actually to make this critical decision in the end. So I feel that this is the same discussion. It's not so much actually about the technology itself. It's more like about the culture, the society that we're also dealing with these kind of things. Is that something that we have to address a lot more in future? So people, because you have been also talking about humanity and
People are usually the key to everything because if they don't want, they don't want, and that's very easy. But not investing in these digital possibilities is cutting you off for the future. Probably not the projects which are on today. They may just survive and be made able, but we will have some new restrictions. You can see this in how AI is restricted in Europe. So there's kind of like, how's the data use? How will people keep on the data? So we will have new laws on data, not just the DSGVO, which is kind of like set already, but there is a new kind of data sovereignty which is given to people, and they want to know what's happening in their lives. So if you are using kind of like technology in future, you want to connect your data with the technology which you're using. And this will happen in the first instance in the mobility sector, where when you have autonomously driven cars, you will have not the insurances like you have them today, which are on the car, but which are on the people using them. And so this makes a difference. So you're connecting, and this will really be part of buildings not that quick, but as soon as this occurs, we will have some very different usages of buildings. Today, it's very complicated to use them in a different way, four different ways during a day, because you always have to have a special database which is in the house, special technology. But in future, you may just have an app which is kind of like general app, and then you will connect with these houses, and you can probably rent out some rooms for some hours. And all these Airbnb discussions in the cities, so that people are keeping up a living space for just tourists. So there will be kind of like data where we can see that these houses can be open for tourists because there is no demand for people living there on the whole. But on the other hand, if there is demand, you're not allowed to rent them out for tourists. So all these kind of interactions with buildings will come. And the more you're in, so the more you will earn with these buildings. And I think BIM was kind of like 10 years too early. So you had in mind the vision, which was very complicated when you started this whole process. It was very, very good and very well-minded, but the technology you built that all on was kind of like you have to really invent it yourself. And there's so much technology now which is just there, where you can use artificial intelligence for, and where you can connect to probably some data spaces and all these kind of stuff. And I think we are just at the point where people, when they stick to this industrial idea of building, they will lose in the next 10, 20 years, not just money, but probably their houses, the relevance in industry, cities who are not kind of like encouraging people to use this kind of data will not be able to really be efficient anymore in kind of like climate, social health, investing in infrastructures, or even in businesses who will be set up there. We can see that today in Barcelona, when we have a good place where we have all the data. We can, by artificial intelligence, give people an idea of which business makes sense in this area and which products make sense. So like Amazon is doing it with their products. They can predict which products will be used in which area of the world. And we can do that together with some little data we can connect. And if you would have this building data as well, you could just say, makes sense in there, and you can probably open up the store there for about 3 hours a day, and then you'll have probably the positive income. And all these decisions will make cities and infrastructures kind of like very attractive for people. And all these who are not having these possibilities, they will simply fall out of the system.
That sounds very interesting. I'm like, there is a lot of aspects that didn't think about it that way. So specifically the idea that we're a bit too early, actually. So that there must be a need for that data to really give it yet again with this terminology, but it's the purpose for it. So to get the attraction then basically, so that building information modeling and the data is needed. So there is a need for it. And then suddenly actually you have it a bit like that the potential is then unfolding, and that this is a bit too early for it. Well, interesting aspect.
Yeah, I mean, you have all the cities. It's all like the social security is based on data, and the more data you have from the buildings, the more social security you will have. And there's not just the police in the future who's caring for it, but you will see on data on like how people act, where they are, not like in China, so that you have kind of like everyone's trying to get the data of everything. But there will be some data which we all generated. It's like paying taxes. There's probably some 20, 30% of your daily life which you give into kind of like a system so that we can solve pandemic issues, we can solve health issues in the winter or whatever, so that you can really see that probably in these parts of the city there's kind of like a virus going on, and you probably don't go there for about 1 week or something if you don't want to get ill. So this will really be kind of like new stuff, and just get the idea further. It's not all imagined so far, but you can imagine that if you don't have data for buildings, these buildings are getting more and more worthless in the future. And all the buildings who are generating data or can connect to all these other data which are there, that's the value of the future. So BIM is not like sticking to what it is probably today, like just on building information. It's kind of like societal information. So it's integrating into a bigger system, and this will happen.
That is a very interesting aspect, and it gives everything maybe, a different twist in perspective, though. So good to have you here, actually, to give that new perspective in things. Now, of course, we'll also look ahead to September, because we all will come together in Berlin for the Building Smart International Summit. And this year's theme is Better Together. So we're referencing yet again, actually, that we need to do things together as humans. And it really feels like more than just a motto, especially in the built environment where we're still facing lots of fragmentation, different systems, disconnected stakeholders, slow processes, and so on. So when you heard Better Together as the motto the first time, what did that mean to you?
Like you said, it's you have to get better together in your business. But better together for me means like be better together with society, with the whole global systems which will occur in the next years. And just have in mind, like artificial intelligence, there will be some systems which do probably half of your daily work during nighttime. So you connect all your data which you are collecting throughout your day, and then you go to bed, and the next morning you just have a kind of like bullet points where it says, so this is the things I would advise you to do, or like you would have done it in the past, so you should do it now. And all this comes together with some new thinkings and some new living intelligence, like I said. So there is not we build a house and then there will be some data somewhere. We don't build a car and then there is some data somewhere. It will all be connected, because these connections give us some kind of security. They will build up some kind of like new infrastructure. They will give us new jobs. It's like when you had agriculture, people couldn't think of, why should I study? Because with knowledge in my mind, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So because I cannot dig anything in the ground with it. And today we think like it with data. So we already realize that data is kind of like a big thing, but we don't get that everything we do is kind of like data. And so these interactions will be better together. And if you just open up this little screw in your minds, you go into a region, into a small city, and you just say, when we build this house and we build it with sustainable material, we plant some trees aside where people feel good, and you have a good climate, then you will have some interactions with local businesses. So this internet business is coming back into the streets. You will have like kind of like a new kind of high streets. Today we have just about 3 people on 500 meter in a living area in a city. Some 25 years ago, it was about 25 people which were on the streets during daytime. And not having these people on the streets makes people feel lonely. They feel insecure. They are feeling like depressed. And you can change this with new kind of buildings, like new kind of infrastructures in the city. But you need to have the data. And the more data you connect, and the more data you have from the buildings, the more you can optimize these buildings for the usage which is necessary. And so you just can probably say, as an investor, not my business. I'm just living for the next 10, 15 years, and then I maybe die. So yeah, go on like you did in the past. But for all the others who have a future of more than 10, 15 years in front, and have an interest in being part of society and life, you will need that data. And BIM is a fascinating platform to build on, because you are so far in so many ways, which you have all connected already. And so you're so much, and you always say like your business is behind. I would say your business is really in front of others. So you're much further than probably the car industry, which hasn't even kind of like a system like BIM. They are just getting it via a new technology Bosch just introduced some days ago. And you're doing it for like 10, 15 years, or for how long? And this is a difference. So you have kind of like an experience. So don't get tired on what you have already done because you think it didn't work out in the past. But even the mobility sector wasn't that far that you could connect with it. And you can in the future.
So, Max, when we're all meeting in Berlin, you will be giving one of the keynote talks, and the title is Better Together. So, you picked up our motto, but then actually it continues with Love the future we are building. So, that already sounds like an invitation, not just to think about the future, but to really enjoy shaping it, something like that. Without spoiling too much, what kind of spirit can participants expect from your talk?
I will give an introduction in more details, like we had today, that there is some more examples and specific fields, and where where buildings can connect. And these connections to other businesses, to other people, to the idea of our society, which is by new technology kind of like it has so much new possibilities that we just don't understand it, because it's not the technology we don't understand, but it's the narratives we have in mind, which should be normal for our daily lives, but all these narratives seems to disappear somehow and we can't find them. And we will give an overview about how this all comes together. So we talking about what is technology, why will it be important, what is a new kind of technology. We will have kind of like sociological ideas of how we interact with cities, how we interact with new ways of life, and we bring it down till probably 18. We'll not talk about all 18 because there's not so much time. Areas of life, but we have some examples from them uh, that we can really see where we need to think in a new way. And is kind of like love is for me, it's the opposite of carelessness. And in today's world, I realize that there's a lot of carelessness because people just want to earn money. But being carelessness in future will just kill you, because everyone will realize, because everyone's got the data, that you're not taking care, that you're doing wrong, and everyone can see it. So it's not like today that you can hope that nobody will find it like it, and then you have these industrial narratives and everybody believes, yeah, but it's like that for the last 20, 50, 70, 150 years. People will just more and more ask, why is he fooling me? And that can just be reshaped if you put some love in it and just care for people and then for what you do. And that is much more than purpose. It's what I said in the beginning. It's like the idea of humanity, that you bring in stuff which really brings our species further, and not just some investors.
Well, better together also means actually taking care of each other. Max, one last question to close our today's episode, because time flies. So if our listeners could just take one idea into their day from you, something practical, inspiring, even something maybe unusual to help them shape their own future, what would it be? Do you have some kind of a tip, of a recommendation, a hint, something like that?
Yes, stop thinking of like, how can I integrate in what's going on? Just think about how can I get a step further and really get kind of like find an inclusive way of interacting with what's on the on the other side. Uh, Either it's technology or so, not just try to integrate like what can AI do and how can I interact with it, but of what is my idea of life and how can I amplify it through technology. So really get inclusive, and if you try to learn that, you will understand more and more of how future is working, and you will understand how why like better together is the only idea we can shape future.
Thank you so much, Max. And that was our journey into the new feature for today, from innovations and ideas to the very real question of how we live and build together. Huge thanks to you, Max, for this inspiring outlook. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, and thanks for being together today.
And of course, thanks for everybody else for tuning in. And now we hope you are as excited as we are to shape what's next together. This September, join us in Berlin for the Building Smart International Summit. 3 full days of packed inspiration, powerful keynotes, like including Max keynote, practical sessions, networking, and new ideas from around the globe. Just Google Building Smart Summit Berlin or visit buildingsmart.org and save your spot, because the future isn't just something that happens, it's something we build better together. Until then, stay curious, stay open, and keep building the future.